Hello, it's Peter, it's from ZZIPP Media, and it's Monday afternoon again. Time for another video walk here in Weymouth, Dorset, UK. In a previous video I took you over to Portland to have a look at the D-Day Museum over there. Today I'm going to stay in Weymouth and look at the history a little further back with a guest. So why don't you join us? Yes, here I am today with a Facebook friend of mine, Mark Vine, who's going to tell us all about the Crabchurch Conspiracy.
The Crabchurch Conspiracy was a conspiracy of royalist sympathisers within Weymouth and Malcolm, and the roots of it stretched all over Dorset, but the final act was played out here in these streets, especially this one, in February 1645, 27th of February. I'm stood next to what was the housing of the Tang Gate. There's another one somewhere hidden under that pavement over there, and through this gate at midnight on the 27th of February 1645 poured more than 1,000 royalist troops. Having destroyed the gate, they then thought they'd had an easy victory, and they proceeded off past the town hall, past the boot, off down the old high street. Their opponent on that night was one Colonel William Sydenham, who was the oldest son of a Dorset squire, and he was MP for Weymouth, and he had under his command 1,300 men. The Royalists had 6,000, and they were under the command of the archetypal cavalier George Lord Goring, a very famous man of the time.
So you say that if this had gone another way, England would be speaking French now.
Maybe not speaking French, but the outcome of the English Civil War could well have been very different.
So England could have been very different than it is now.
Very different. The Commonwealth, a lot of the stuff we take for granted nowadays may not have come about, because King Charles I believed in absolute rule, the absolute rule of kings, his word. He believed he was ordained by God to rule, and thankfully for William Sydenham, thanks to William Sydenham, he turned that tide of Catholicism which was coming across the channel.
Right, shall we go forward onto the next site?
Okay. This is the second poignant location. It's the site of the old Chapel Hay Fort. The Chapel Hay Fort was a 14th century church which the Roundheads fortified. They put banks and ditches all around it. They basically filled it with cannon, spreading out all over the quayside, and especially over Malcolm. This was the site that the initial royalist assault on the February the 9th at midnight took place here in the Nose Fort. They took this place, and it meant that they'd basically already won the game. It was the most powerful fort of many forts in this area. It's especially poignant because Colonel William Sydenham's brother, Major Francis Sydenham, was down in the town when the fort was assaulted, and he was the only one who kept his head. He gathered all his ousted troops, and he made an assault up this road, Chapel Hay Street, towards the Chapel Fort. They almost regained it, but he was mortally wounded in the attempt. His loyal men carried him back down into Weymouth, and he died a few hours later of his wounds. During the Commonwealth period, Cromwell's rule if you like, this street was renamed Francis Street, and that was for the whole 9 years or so of Commonwealth rule. When Charles II visited the town, it was hastily changed back. I think this is the street where Francis Sydenham was mortally wounded. This is the location of the old town steps of Weymouth. There were 70, and Colonel William Sydenham set his ambush here at the bottom. The point being that if the ambush didn't work and they were overwhelmed, his troops and himself could go up the steps and into the chapel fort and continue the fight from there. The steps are in line with what used to be an old Tudor rope ferry that was right opposite St Nicholas Street in Malcolm, and of course the church was the chapel fort of St Nicholas, so it was a direct line across the quayside, up the steps to Chapel Hay and the church. Luckily the ambush did work, and more than 200 of Goring's royalist troops were killed in the ensuing melee. The troops of his, it was still coming down from the top of the high street. Obviously it was so dark and it was cold, it was freezing cold February night. They didn't know what the noises were. They probably assumed that the royalists were winning, so they were literally trampling on the dead of their own comrades. Sydenham's men, once they discharged their muskets and pistols, upended them, drew their swords and rushed out, and there was a big hand-to-hand fight. Goring's men eventually extricated themselves from it. Sydenham's men chased them back up the high street and out of the town. And these are the steps that they were defending. This is the site, the line of the old Weymouth High Street over there. You can see here, to quote Prince Charles, the monstrous carbuncle that was the WPBC offices, which every man and his dog in Weymouth wants destroyed, and let's hope that it happens. You can see the royalists would have come down this line to the steps. They would have walked 1, 2 o'clock in the morning straight into Sydenham's ambush, cannon, musket, pistol fire. This is literally hallowed ground. This is where 200 men died for their cause, for their king. And it should be protected. This area should have an archaeological dig done to it to evaluate the beginnings of our town and the way it developed. This area, another poignant area for the Crabchurch story. It was here that 250 Irishmen were killed during the battle. February 1645, most of this wasn't dry land, it was a deep hole, a deep inlet of seawater. It's called the Hole locally. The Irishmen had fought their way in from the Nothe fort, which they'd held since the 9th of February, since the initial Crabchurch started, and their idea was to meet up with Goring in the middle of the town. That was their confidence. They were so sure they were going to win. They got to where the current Weymouth Bridge is, and they took a small fort there. Sydenham's men by then had beaten Goring and were coming back this way. They met the Irishmen, they fought them, they beat them out of the fort, they chased them down along the quayside. Sydenham's horse was shot and killed beneath him as they went. When the Irishmen got to this corner here, unfamiliar with the ground, it was pitch black obviously, middle of the night, freezing cold, probably foggy. They forgot to turn right basically, and 250 of them were driven into the icy cold waters of Weymouth Quay, where they were picked off by Sydenham's Roundheads and killed.
We'll leave Mark there at this point. If you want to buy Mark's book about the Crabchurch Conspiracy, you'll find a link down in the description section. That will tell you all about the history itself, more about the history itself, and how to buy the book. So join me on my next video photo walk from Weymouth, Dorset, UK. Bye for now.